Welcome in. Hope you're warm wherever you are. There's no live racing in thoroughbreds or quarter horses on this Tuesday, but we've got It's Official. Jeff Siegel, Jeremy Plonk from First Bet and Express Bet. Jeff, we're not taking the day off for the cold. Of course, you're probably like sunning out there in California.
Look, I went outside just to see if it was warm enough to jump into my pool. It wasn't quite warm enough, but it's close. I'm telling you, it's close. So maybe next week it'll start to warm up again. But I feel for the people who actually have winter in their lives. We don't have that here. So
Yeah, I've got snow to shovel when this podcast is over and before it gets dark, like at 5 o'clock. So yeah, pray for me out there in the cold this afternoon. We've got the heated up Triple Crown Trail starting this weekend in real earnest at Fairgrounds, where the Lecomte Stakes will be the feature race. Road to the Kentucky Derby at Fairgrounds. We're going to see Track Phantom. We're going to see Nash in a rematch from the Gunrunner Stakes. That should be a good one. We'll talk about that in review next week. But we've got 5 topics for you to review this week for the past weekend of racing. And Jeff, it was Cal Cup Day out in Southern California last weekend on Saturday, and the Chosen Vron stole the show to me in the Cal Cup Sprint. He just keeps on keeping on.
The Chosen Vron down at the rail needs to get going from there as Brickyard Ride turns for home with a 2-length lead. The Chosen Vron now angles out, and these two hook up at the 8th pole. Brickyard Ride, the Chosen Vron, though, just ambles up to him, and the Chosen Vron simply invincible as he will cruise once again. He's now 15 for 20. What an amazing gelding the Chosen Vron is. Brickyard Ride second. Geezer finished third. The running time, a crisp 109 flat.
Back in the day, Brickyard Ride was winning races like that, but the Calbred Sprinter title torch has been passed, obviously, to the Chosen Vron, and he is so good. I love horses like this because we talk about the early retirements. We talk about the 3-year-olds not coming back at 4. I love these veteran sprinters like this, and man, I hope he keeps going.
Well, as a gelding, I think I have to give Eric Kruljack all the credit in the world because he knows that there's no stud value here. So his only value is as a racehorse, and that means treat him right, race his races, don't over-race him, don't ask him to do anything that he can't do. You don't have to ship. There's plenty of money at the California bred races, and this horse now has won an amazing 15 out of 20. But look at, what's more impressive than that? How about 15 wins? 1 second and 2/3. I mean, that is an amazing record because if he can see you, he will beat you. The other thing about him is he's a sprinter, but he can run a mile. I mean, that's no issue for him. And not only that, but he's only run 3 times on grass. He's got 2 wins and a third. He's by Vronsky, who is a grass horse who gets grass horses. So he can basically do anything you want him to do. Just lead him over and he'll run for you. 14 stakes races. Winners there. Well, he's already a grade 1 in an open company. It's not like he's just a cowboy. A lot of these great state-bred horses, Jeremy, they're really good when you let them be in their element, and then they step out and they get exposed a little bit. The Chosen Vron has won 10 out of his last 11 starts. His only defeat in that race, that sequence, was a 5th place finish in what may have been the toughest Breeders' Cup sprint in the last 25 years. Yeah. It's won by Elite Power with Goodnight second. The Cigar Mile winner came out of that race behind him to win. And Dr. Schivel, who was beating a photo in the Breeders' Cup Breeders' Cup sprint a couple of years ago, he was behind him as well. You talk about a tough race. I mean, I love this horse. He is such a pro, and he's so admirable, and the connections have done right by him.
He only got beat 5 lengths in that Breeders' Cup Sprint. I picked him that day because I was like, you got to beat him to prove it to me. Those elite horses like Elite Power were better than him, but man, on a regional circuit, he is so strong. One of the better California-bred sprinters we've seen in a long time, and there have been some very good ones over the years. You think back to Thor's Echo, Amazombie, I was going through, Big Jag, Dancing in Silks won in the synthetic era in a Breeders' Cup Sprint. So there have been some very good Cal Cup sprinters or Cal-bred sprinters. And you look at a horse, like a Calbred to win $1.2 million. He's not the richest Calbred of all time, but when you get up into that kind of category, other horses who are Calbreds who earn $1 million too, California Flag, Evening Jewel, Cavalier, you're in pretty good company there. I mean, this horse in just sprint races has been phenomenal, up to a mile. Like you said, he can do a lot of things. And these are the kind of horses we root for in this era where, look, everything just feels negative when it comes to longevity of careers and seeing stars out there. To get horses like this, it's fabulous. Not the best betting race in the world, obviously, as he's, odds on against the Cowbreds, but let's see him back in some open company and take on some top competition maybe this summer at Del Mar again, as he goes back maybe for a Bing Crosby title defense, where the turf and surf meet there coming up in July or August. Would look forward to see him in. But like you said, keep him healthy, keep him happy, keep his races spaced out, and their job is to keep him going as long as they can. So there's no rush to go head to Oakland or run in the Count Fleet or something like that. Keep him at home. I looked at his record. He's been outside of California once. He went to Turf Paradise to win a stakes race back as in a 3 or 4 year old season. So it's been a while, but I don't see him traveling anytime soon with the Chosen Vron.
Yeah, that was before he became Vronny. He's not the Chosen Vron anymore. He's Vronny. And by the way, I'll bet people would be surprised to learn that his career top buyer speed figure was around 2 turns at a mile when he won a race at I think it was it was called it was at Santa Anita last year. A race called the Tisnow, which was a mile race. He won that race by 6 earned a 103 buyer number. Not his first or only triple-digit buyer, but it was his best. So it just goes to show you it doesn't matter where you run him as long as you send him over healthy. And he's only had 12 starts in the last 2 years, but he makes them count. And that's why he's still what he is, okay? They haven't done anything out of his element. So anyway, Ronnie, one of the most popular racehorses in California, and it's just unfortunate that he really doesn't have a rival in the state break company anymore. I mean, it'd be nice if he had some kind of rival where they can go head-to-head a few times, but I don't think that's going to happen. But anyway, it's just a thrill to see a horse like this. And, we don't have that many of them that people follow. If they do, they usually get retired because they're colts or they're stallions, prospects. But as a California-bred gelding, it's the best of all worlds for those of us who enjoy racehorses and want to see them run over a period of time.
One horse we're looking forward to run next is Fierceness, and he's not far off from a return in the Holy Bull Stakes. He's our second topic on the board because he's been working in recent weeks down in South Florida for Trod Pletcher, last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner and expected Eclipse Award champion to be named here in a couple days. Fierceness the Ferocious, he was back working in company with his stablemate Locked, and Locked is no slouch. Of course, he was the winner last year of the Breeders' Futurity and ran third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile behind Fierceness. So here they are working in company. And Jeff, to the victor go the spoils, if you will. I mean, when you have these big barns and you can match horses up like Pletcher can, Baffert, Chad Brown, you get these kind of workouts. This is really big for the development of horses to have this kind of company that they can work with each day. Locked in Fierceness going through the paces down at Palm Beach Downs on the 13th of January. What do you make of it?
Well, that's Locked on the outside. And I know that when you work these two horses together, or horses of this quality, the instructions are almost always, all right, just go an easy 5/8, just finish head and head. It's not a race now. Just finish head and head and get, the first time back. We don't want to do too much with them. And then you have, Locked on the outside. Now he's going to have to be niggled out a little bit as Fierceness is going to prevail and prove clearly best. And I'm sure that the rider of Fierceness came back to the barn and told Todd, boss, I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it because this is how, and we know Locke's a good colt, but Fierceness, and I was looking forward to seeing this because I wanted to see how he had wintered, and he looks like a horse who's even better now than he was when he demolished his rivals in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
Yeah, and for the second straight year, Pletcher's going to have the champion 2-year-old, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner. It was Forte a year ago. Forte didn't get to the Kentucky Derby the way that they had hoped. Of course, the foot injury put him aside and scratched from the Derby on Derby Day. Let's talk Forte and Fierceness as we kind of hit the same point in the road as they're coming back as 3-year-olds. You look back to Forte last year, he was a much more developed 2-year-old. He ran 5 times at 2, 4 of those in victory. Only 3 starts for Fierceness. The one thing about comparing these two is Fierceness, I think, was always meant to be a good one. You know, he didn't debut until Saratoga. He ran the 3 times. Forte, I think they got away with one with him. He was only $110,000 purchase, not a big money buy for those kind of connections. And Forte debuted in May before the Belmont Stakes at Belmont Park in May of last year. So I don't think they expected Forte to deliver what Forte did, and he was a pleasant surprise. He came along as a great 2-year-old and had a pretty good 3-year-old season as well. Fierceness, to me, looks more like a Triple Crown prospect at this point than Forte did a year ago.
Well, he has more natural tactical speed, for one. I mean, Forte could lay fairly close, but it looks to me like the way I just saw this colt work here, that, you know, if he makes the lead, forget it. I mean, you're not going to catch him, because a really top class, maybe one of the top 5 2-year-olds of last year, couldn't even stay with him. And that tells me that this colt has matured and developed at the proper rate between this late 2-year-old and early 3-year-old season, as his sire did, City of Light, who was a late developer. So you add it all up, and you see what we saw in this breeze. And not that he wanted to do it, but I mean, he could have gone at 58, or something like that. There's no point in that. But he's developed, he's matured, he's got a pedigree that would suggest that he is going to continue to improve. And now it's just a matter of, what he wants to do with him. And, he's going to run him in the Holy Bull and then the Florida Derby. It's all he really will need. And then into the Derby itself. So anybody who didn't have him ranked number 1 might be tempted to switch if they haven't at this stage. I know you like him on number 1, and I was kind of thinking that Bob Baffert's colt out here, Nisos, could be like 1 and 1A, but I want to see. I don't know. I mean, I just hope they both make it into the Derby, and I'm not sure that's going to happen, and we'll talk about that a little bit down the road as well.
Now, for Fierceness, next up, again, he's looking at the February 3rd Holy Bull Stakes. When Forte came back, he waited all the way till March and didn't run until the Fountain of Youth. But again, he had a deeper campaign as a 2-year-old and a much longer one. So each horse is different. While you want to go with like what has worked for you in the past as a trainer, and you often see these kind of carbon copy campaigns between horses from year to year to year, you have to look at the individual and what they kind of have tread on the tires and what they've already done when you map out their campaign. So Fierceness only has the 3 career starts. He didn't start until August at Saratoga. So they're getting him a start a little bit earlier in the year. Maybe they need to do a little bit more with him, but it'll still be the 2 preps, and they'll probably end up in the Florida Derby as expected. So 2-start campaign for him into Kentucky, and an all systems go right now for Fierceness, who looks like the Kentucky Derby favorite at this stage. No question about it. One
of the things I want to say about this colt, though, is that he's very willing in the morning. And if you don't want to run him, you have to almost simulate races in the morning, make sure that he's fit. And he just worked him with one of his other best 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. So now he's going to have to say, okay, I can't do that anymore because I don't want to ruin Locke. He's probably now going to have to start working with older horses, just because I don't think Todd has anybody in his 3-year-old ranks that can stay with him. And he does look like a horse that will work and get a lot out of his workouts if you let him. So he's probably an ideal type of horse to train, because you don't really have to race him in this shape. He'll do it in the morning too if you want him to.
As for that sparring partner, Locked, he's expected to go to the Sam F. Davis, which is the prep for the Tampa Bay Derby on the Gulf Coast. And also down in South Florida, we got some news last week that Sierra Leone, who was a really impressive runner-up in the Remsen Stakes, he's heading out of town. He's going to the Risen Star and going to take advantage of that long stretch run at Fairgrounds. So we'll see what comes out of the LeCompte this weekend at Fairgrounds and who might meet Sierra Leone when we get to the Risen Star. But there's not going to be a lot of horses lining up to challenge Fierceness and the Holy Bull. I think they're already starting to kind of find their way out of town in some particular spots, or await the Fountain of Youth Stakes. The Fountain of Youth could be very interesting as the Holy Bull starts the series for the Florida Derby Trail. People may not want to run against Fierceness, which would make that Fountain of Youth a very important race to a lot of trainers. And we'll talk about some of those horses coming up in just a moment who might be part of that Fountain of Youth talk. Okay, let's stay with the Kentucky Derby Trail and talk about what's going on off the track. Off the track, they're sticking it to Bob Baffert, we're talking about, announced just in the last few days that Bob Baffert will not be permitted to run horses, of course, in the 2024 Kentucky Derby due to his extended ban that was extended back in July of last year. But last week they announced that the Baffert horses are going to have to move out earlier than expected if they want to stay eligible. That means horses prepping in Baffert's name won't be eligible here in another week or so, Jeff, after the cutoff date. If they want to stay with Baffert, they won't be eligible to run in the Kentucky Derby.
That is sticking it to him. And of course, Churchill can do everything they want. They can't. I mean, they can make it January 1st next year if they want to, or if they want to continue to extend the ban that he has. Baffert really has no recourse, or does he? I don't know. At least legally, I don't think he'll try that anymore. But I know one thing: he might just say, you know, something, you don't want my horses, fine. I'll blow you off and see how you like it. And well, we're the Derby. Yeah, the Derby. But, you know, I mean, he's got some loyal owners, too, that might say, just win the Santa Anita Derby or whatever Derby, don't go, and then bring him back at the Preakness. And we saw the last couple of years, you don't have to win the Kentucky Derby to be a champion 3-year-old. So it'll be interesting to see who cries uncle here, okay?
Right.
Is Bob going to take horses like Nisos and a few others and put them out of his barn so that his owners can have a chance to run in the Kentucky Derby? Or is he going to say, you know something, it's probably better off of your colt or whatever if we don't run. That way I can map a plan out that will be less dangerous for him in terms of health and soundness. And let's start with the Preakness and work from there. I don't know what he's going to do, Jeremy. I mean, let's say you owned Nisos, for example. What would you do?
Right.
What if your trainer, whoever it might be, was in the same predicament, what would you do?
Well, I probably have my horses in a different barn at this point, right? I mean, I would try to avoid the situation and not be in the entangled web. But if you are at this point and they have moved the goalposts, like that's the problem, right? I mean, they moved the goalposts instead of it being at the end of February when the horses had to move. They now have to be out by January 29th. I failed to mention the date. They've got to be out of his barn by January 29th. Today's January 16th as we talk. So they've got 13 days to find a new home. And it was just announced a few days ago that new time frame would be. So as they've moved the goalpost, that makes it very tough on a lot of people, right? I mean, if you have Nisos and you're Bayoma Corp, and that's Susan Chu, she had Cheetu, a horse who made it to the Kentucky Derby, I think 2013, 2014 or so, maybe 2016 back there, 7, 8, 10 years ago. They've had the Derby experience with her and her husband. Will they bypass the Kentucky Derby with a horse that looks to be one of the best in the crop? Nisos, the winner of the Bob Hope, looked absolutely amazing in that last win at Del Mar. He's training like he's got a race coming up, Jeff. He worked 6 furlongs just yesterday, this from XBTV on Monday at Santa Anita. Where will he end up? I mean, they're looking at the Bob Lewis Stakes, but the Bob Lewis is going to come up after that cutoff date for the Kentucky Derby eligibility if he's going to be in Baffert's barn. So Nisos off this work, he's either going to find a new home before he runs back in the Bob Lewis, or if he runs for Baffert, barring any kind of court injunction or anything like that, he will be bypassing the Kentucky Derby. And right now, he's my number 2 ranked horse in the country in my countdown to the Crown rankings.
And has done nothing since his last win to think that he's getting nothing but better. I mean, this was a 6 furlong work in 12-4, and he's not a brilliantly crazy American Pharaoh Justify type of workhorse, but I tell you, he's one of the few Baffert horses who's actually run better than he works, and he certainly works fine. I mean, he looks like a top class colt, but he saves his best stuff for the afternoon. And again, I put you on the spot. I mean, for me, I've had the good fortune of running 2 horses in the Kentucky Derby. One that got beat ahead, and the other one who never ran again. So I've had the ups and downs, mostly downs actually. I'm so old school. I mean, I'm older than old school, and so I mean, Charlie Whittingham never really cared about the Derby, and finally he won one. But I can honestly say that for me, and I know I'm 2% of the population in horse when it comes to this, it wouldn't be that big a deal to me to miss it if I knew I had the best horse and I could make up for it in the Preakness and the Belmont and the Traffic and the Breeders' Cup Classic, which wasn't always the case. So, I mean, if I believed in my trainer enough to think that if I move this horse, he's going to fall apart or something like that, or he will not develop like I think he should, I might be tempted to just bite the bullet and not go. But I know I'm in the minority because most people don't even get a sniff at having a horse in the Derby, and it's something that I've already experienced twice. But I wouldn't fault anybody either way, whatever they decided to do and what the people who own nice horses decide to do.
Right. Yeah, that's a big deal, right? If you've never been there, if I've never had a horse in the Kentucky Derby and you're posed with this and you've got one of the winter book favorites, then your decision-making process could be swayed quite a bit by your urgency to get there in a once-in-a-lifetime type opportunity. If you've been there over and over, like Muth's owner was the owner of Medina Spirit, right? We're talking about, the same Zidane stables there, Almer Zidane. So they may not see that same urgency. And since they were embroiled in all the negative energy and everything that went on at Churchill Downs and the back and forth, Zidane Racing may not want to go back to the Kentucky Derby with somebody other than Baffert. So again, all these horses that we talked about on that list for Baffert, different owners, things like that, they could all be in different situations where one owner says, look, this is my once in a lifetime opportunity. Another one says, I've been down the path before and don't want to do this. Winstock's owner, Ed Allred, who owns Los Alamitos Racecourse, that's the winner of the Los Al Futurity, has already said if his horse isn't trained by Baffert, he's not going to the Kentucky Derby. So there might already be a pass taken there with Winstock amongst those horses on the list for Baffert. The funny thing about this, Jeff, is people who have followed this show or followed me over the last 3-4 years since the Medina Spirit controversy know I have not been in Baffert's corner at all. Yeah. I am not a pro Bob Baffert supporter. I've dealt with Bob since 1996, the first time I met him and worked around him and his horses, known him for a long time, have always been cordial with him in media things, but I did not like the positive. I did not like the reaction to it. I did not like the PR tour that he went on, Fox News, etc. after the fact. And I kind of felt for a while he got what he deserved.
Yeah.
But this seems to be, like you had mentioned, you write the headlines for the show in here, sticking at the Bob. This does feel like Churchill Downs now is just sticking at the Bob at this point. To change, like last year, okay, it's got to be in by February 28th. To make an 11th hour change now to January 29th to get the horses out of the barn, I don't get that one. And what's going to end up happening here is sentiment is going to turn, and Baffert's going to look like the victim in this. Yeah. And people are going to be sympathetic to Baffert when Baffert played I'm the victim at the beginning of this, and that's what turned everybody off, right? People like, own up to it, own up to it. And that's what Churchill Downs even said, why they gave him the extra year suspension, because he fought it in the courts. He didn't own up to it, didn't show, enough contrition, which is, obviously debatable. What is enough contrition in there? But, for peddling a false narrative is the official reason in the press release from CDI on why they went ahead and added the extra year to his ban here in 2024. They're going to end up making him the victim out of this, and they're going to turn out to be the bad guy when they were trying to do something good at the start, which was protect the brand, protect the racing industry, and keep the general public feeling confident in horse racing that somebody's out there. There's a sheriff out there. But, man, they're screwing it up.
Right. Well, and then what about the owners? I mean, what are they, they're putting them in a bad position too. So
sure,
it's just, it's not a cut and dried, sentiment one way or the other. It's just a bad scene. And to me, it's the owners, it's the horses. I always think the trainer is the third part of the equation, down here somewhere. So not that sympathetic one way or the other, but I know one thing, it's putting the owners in a bad spot. So we'll find out. And this thing's going to come to a head in 9 days, whatever it is, or
less than 2 weeks.
Yeah. So we find out what's going to happen. Those horses are either going to be in that barn or out, and then we'll know for sure in a week from Saturday.
Yeah, and entries will be taken Wednesday for that race. So they probably, when they take entries, are probably going to have to enter under a different trainer name in the eligibility. So, time is ticking on what's going on in this really time bomb of a story that's now into its third year plus. As we go to our fourth topic, we're going to keep talking Triple Crown, because the Triple Crown tracker this week had a couple stakes or a stakes race last week in Western Florida to talk about the Pasco, and also a very impressive winner at Gulfstream Park on the undercard. So here's our Triple Crown tracker this week. We're going to start off with Bookham Dano, Hawaii 5-0 style in the Pasco.
Bookham Dano up on the far outside and Rathmore. Those two go on best. West Saratoga did not go on. It's still 4 lengths back as Bookham Dano takes over. Bookham Dano to the top of the stretch. The lead now a length and a half. Rathmore back in second. 4 more back to West Saratoga. El Principito down the outside and Bookham Dano takes off for home. Samuel Morin and Bookham Dano by the 8th pole, suddenly in front by 5. Ground loss didn't matter today. Bookham Dano running them off their feet in the Pasco is going to win this one by double digits. Bookham Dano, let's call it 11 or 12 in the end.
We know he can sprint. This Jersey bred's awfully good for Derek Ryan. Really just a second place finish in the Nashua behind a good one in Where's Chris, the ill-fated Where's Chris. Bookham Dano is very good around one turn, Jeff.
He is, and that's one of the reasons why there are two things about it. Number one, the connection saying we're not interested in the Kentucky Derby, but we are interested in the Saudi Derby because that's a one-turn race. A lot of money there, so that's where he's headed next, and that makes sense. He is a gelding, so. But if you have a 3-year-old that looks like he might be that good, and his biggest payday is going to come when he's a 3-year-old. I guess you have to, take advantage of that. His buyer number of 86 isn't going to jump off any chart or anything like that, but he did win easily, and he's also a sprinter. But he might be one of these horses that could be a perfect miler because he's not a front-running type of horse. He settles and then blasts from the quarter pole to the wire. Perfect style for a one-turn mile. So I really think that I think they're doing the right thing. I mean, with all that money, I would definitely go that same route. Again, not knowing who he beat in this race. West Saratoga's not terrible, but he made him look like a claiming horse. So this is a nice horse, and I'd be interested to see how far he can carry himself.
Yeah, West Saratoga had won the Iroquois at Churchill Downs. Of course, Bookham Dano by Buchero, who was a really good turf sprinter, but out of a Go Sapper mare, like you said. And he's run a mile. He's ran well in the Nashua at a mile. He'll go the mile in the Saudi Derby. And then you're looking maybe when you come back to the U.S., like you said, you're not a Kentucky Derby horse, but there are some good races like the Woody Stevens, and then you keep in the sprint ranks and up to a mile perhaps throughout the course of the season. So Bookham Dano on our Triple Crown tracker, but we don't think he will be on the trail very long. One horse who may have thrown his hat into the trail at Gulfstream Park over the weekend was Conquest Warrior. We're going to take you back to the start of his maiden special weight win. You're going to see he gets in trouble. We'll let Pete Aiello take you through the whole race here as Conquest Warrior for Shug McGahee. The second straight week, Shug has put a horse who looks to be squarely on the Derby trail.
And they're off. Sandwiched badly at the break was Conquest Warriors shuffled to last. They move now into the far turn through a 46-4 opening half mile. With the lead, Wistucky by a neck. Antiquarian on the outside is now second. Military Road third at the inside. Moving up from behind the speed, Conquest Warrior, he's trying to find a way through. He's got a ton of run here after some early trouble. He's very much part of this through the opening half mile in 46-4. They race past the quarter-mile mark. Plenty of hopes through 3/4 and 12 flat. Conquest Warrior just checked hard again. Antiquarian on the outside of Wistucky, who tries to turn him away. Off cover, Military Road is next. Down the center in Conquest Warrior. Antiquarian, he has the lead, battling hard. Wistucky. Conquest Warrior gathers his feet, and here he comes. This is a huge effort from Conquest Warrior. He's in time.
So, Jeff, Conquest Warrior following up Change of Command, the horse for Shug, who won an allowance company a week ago. We talked about there being some openings in South Florida because the Fountain of Youth won't have fierceness. Some of the other horses heading out of town. Could we see a horse like this head towards the Fountain of Youth?
Yeah, you could. I mean, again, he's by City of Life, who suddenly got two really nice 3-year-olds that we know of, Fierceness, of course, being the other one. This horse had run a distant third in a really hot race at Aqueduct in his debut back in early December. Runaway winner there, and it was an off track, and Conquest Warrior was just kind of like hacking around there. And he was bet seriously in this race. He was bet down to 7-2, and I had liked the horse in that race, the runner-up Antiquarian. We put him on our eye-catching list, and he was 8-1, and it was to me like a good gamble there. And he got worn down late, but I feel I have no regrets on that because the winner should have won by many. And Conquest Warrior overcoming trouble to win. It wasn't a particularly fast race, but I don't know if he's ever going to get in a worse trip than he got. So you have to take him seriously, Jeremy. I mean, how off a maiden win like that, how high do you rank them if in fact do you rank him?
Well, I go to 20 in my countdown of the Crown rankings, and I'm going to put him in around 16 here. We'll have the new rankings out this Friday, but I like him towards the bottom of the list there. I think this is a horse who's got pedigree to play. Shug's going to take his time with him. Again, maybe we see this horse get another race before we get into the stakes company with Conquest Warrior, because he's got Change of Command, who just won an allowance race. He's got to go to the stakes ranks next, and Change of Command has taken on some really top-notch horses in the division through his 2- and 3-year-old season. So he's a little bit farther down the pike right now, Change of Command. So it's always necessity, the mother of invention, when it comes to which races these trainers are going to put their horses in. If you've got one for the Fountain of Youth, like Shug probably does with Change of Command, then he doesn't have to rush this horse into that particular spot. Maybe they can find an allowance race, maybe go on the road. Shug not averse to taking a horse to Fairgrounds, to Oaklawn, back up to the Wood Memorial. So he'll have plenty of chances at the end of the line. He just needs to get somewhere between there and now. He needs that next step for Conquest Warrior. But I think this is a good one. I think he's got a chance to be pretty good in this year's crop. So Bill Mott, Shug McGahee with big-time 3-year-olds this year. Feels like we're like back in the 90s all over again, perhaps. On this year's Triple Crown Trail. Lecomte Stakes this Saturday, the big race on the Triple Crown tracker that we'll be watching at the Fairgrounds. Again, a rematch there of the Gunrunner Stakes, where Track Phantom and Nash ran first and third. They're back in there. Snead, the runner-up in the Gunrunner, the horse I like best out of that group down in New Orleans, bypassing this race, awaiting the Risen Star next. So should be a good one in the Lecomte Stakes. Jeff and I will talk about that one in our Friday handicapping podcast. Be sure to tune in for the First Call podcast on Friday when we handicap the Lecomte Stakes and all of the card from the Fairgrounds. Our fifth and final topic each week are the stars of tomorrow. We just showed you a maiden winner, but we got a couple more maiden winners. Maybe not necessarily to the Kentucky Derby, but maybe the Oaks filly here. Pretty Liam for Todd Pletcher. She's a good-looking 3-year-old filly.
They straighten for the drive. Off cover, it's Hidden Vaz trying to track down Beanpot, who still has the lead down the center. Pretty Liam shifting ground and shifting gears. Here comes Pretty Liam and the St. Elias green colors. She blows by the leader. Pretty Liam and the daughter of Liam's Map is on to victory.
Good weekend for maiden winners for Pletcher. Most of them are. We're going to talk about another one in a moment. But first up, Jeff, Pretty Liam, what do you make of her?
11-1 for the last furlong there, so it wasn't like she was passing tired horses.
No.
Yeah, I know that all weather service is very fast, but visually, as she settled in the 4th position early, rallied wide, one going away, over 5/8 of a mile, daughter of Liam's Map. Most of them will get a mile, and this is out of a mare by Blame. So there's certainly a right for her connections to think that she'll run on. I saw a quote that might indicate that she might just go through her conditions, maybe even go to grass. So I don't know if Todd is going to try to do anything fancy early on in her career. Maybe just build her up and let her let her develop a little bit more. But what a debut there! I mean, she was really, really impressive there, and you have to think, God, there's a lot of options for a filly like this, especially this time of the year. We'll see what you can do.
Yeah, and the 3-year-old filly grass season has really grown over the years to be a lot more important and a lot more lucrative on the East Coast from Kentucky to New York. So she'll have plenty of options if they want to go the grass route with her a little bit later. Now, one on the dirt for Pletcher in the Colt ranks, debuted at Aqueduct over the past weekend. That was Tuscan Sky, and there was no doubt about this one in the end.
Junior and Have You Heard has not been given the cue yet, and Have You Heard is back up by a length and a half. Tuscan Sky is now starting to rally, and here comes the first-time starter, Tuscan Sky, who's now putting it all together. Have You Heard for a final furlong, but Tuscan Sky has now got the feel of it, and now Tuscan Sky will run right on by. It is Manny Franco, Tuscan Sky, 3-year-old by Vino Rosso, wins impressively. Have You Heard second, then came Late Run from True Connection and Ambition in 1 minute 10.51 seconds.
Nice stride through the wire there. Good gallop out. A lot to like about this Vino Rosso colt. Now, I know win margins are exaggerated a lot of times on off tracks. Closers down the middle of the track and Aqueduct when it's wet. We've seen that before. Not to overinflate this particular race, but I thought it was pretty good. 24-3 for the last quarter. Not a bad debut at all for Tuscan Sky.
I was very impressed, but then you have the caveat, as you mentioned, of it being on an off track. Also, Todd Pletcher left him in New York, which maybe indicates that he didn't think he was all that great. Maybe, I don't know. he also was 7-2 in this race on a 6-runner field. So he probably didn't do anything in the morning that would have tipped him off. And we didn't show it, but down the backstretch and into the far turn, if you had told me that the winner of this race was going to win by 5, the first horse I would have said that would not be him would be Tuscan Sky, because he was spinning his wheels. He looked like he hated the ground. He was like, he just like, get me out of here, And then all of a sudden, turning into the stretch, he decided, hey, this isn't so bad. And he put his head down and he just exploded. Now, I've been fooled before by horses that went off by themselves in the mud. Sure. I'm not going to get fooled again. But he's worth following, because he can do this. He has to prove that he can't do it on a fast track. And bred like he is, Vino Rosso, he's supposed to run longer, isn't he? So I'm going to follow him closely. He might be pretty good.
He's a half brother to Private Creed, who really, made a lot of money in turf sprints, but a talented horse. So, Tuscan Sky, we will see how he turns out. Turn Up the Trees won for Pletcher over the weekend at Gulfstream, and this was a real ballyhooed horse, but he didn't impress me all that much. 112 and change. He ground out the victory on Saturday at Gulfstream. Turn Up the Trees, though, I think probably will get more hype than this particular horse, Tuscan Sky. But if you told me which one do you like out of the two right now, I kind of like Tuscan Sky's win in Maiden Company at Aqueduct better than the win at Gulfstream by Turn Up the Trees.
Turn Up the Trees was a horse that we featured in our eye-catching segment, and I expected him to win, and he did, but I thought he'd win by 5, and he made hard work of it. I mean, I'll give him credit for reaching back in the final 50 when he was challenged by both, on both sides.
Right.
But the horse that finished third in that race, he had worked with and had beaten him off by 10, and he was like a half length back at the end. So I don't really know if he ran below his best or whatever it was. But, based on just pure performance, you'd have to say Tuscan Sky ran better. But, we'll see. I think Todd still thinks that other colt's going to be pretty good. But he certainly was expecting better than he got, even though he managed to win anyway.
We got to look back. We got to look ahead on this particular show. And these 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I said so. That's how we play the game. We showed our appreciation for the chosen Vrani, with his 10th win in his last 11 starts, winning the Cal Cup Sprint. Just a veteran California-bred sprinter who is fun to watch and follow. Fierceness the Ferocious was back working. The Pro Tem 2-year-old champion and Kentucky Derby winner book favorite worked really well over the weekend against stablemate Locked. We showed you that video. Are they sticking it to Bob? Churchill Downs Incorporated moving the goalposts on the date in which horses must vacate the Bob Baffert barn this year, just about less than 2 weeks away, or be ineligible for this year's Kentucky Derby. We talked about that and the fallout from which. We also looked at the Triple Crown tracker this week that reviewed the Pasco Stakes at Tampa Bay Downs and also the troubled maiden special weight win for Conquest Warrior, who overcame a lot in that one for Shug McGahee. Our 2 stars of tomorrow, both trained by Todd Pletcher. One in Florida named Pretty Liam, a filly, 3-year-old filly, and then the 3-year-old colt in New York, Tuscan Sky. Those 5 topics, again, are official big board for this week's edition of It's Official. We'll do it all again next week. Now, sometimes we throw in a bonus topic, and Jeff and I laughed a little bit about the weather at the top of the show here. It's ugly on the East Coast. Parks canceled their races. Mahoning Valley canceled their races. It's ugly in the Midwest. The quarter horse dates today at Louisiana Downs were canceled due to wintry weather in Bossier City, Louisiana. So it's ugly everywhere. Which got me thinking, has it always been this way? I mean, do we always just cancel? And then I saw this tweet on the platform X from Bobby Lillis, who's a part of the Maryland Racing Commission, one of the commissioners in Maryland. He harkened back to the old days and showed some pictures and news clippings from 1976 at Bowie Racecourse, which used to be Maryland's home of winter racing. They only ran in the harshest conditions at Bowie, it seemed like. Jeff, I remember going there as a young tyke with my dad. We would actually get snowed out from school. They'd cancel school, but they didn't cancel the races at Bowie. And I don't know, my dad, because of good parenting, would drive us in the ice and snow all the way on the back roads to Bowie to go to the races there. What I remember about going to Bowie is when you parked in the lot we did, which is either the free lot or the really cheap lot, we were not in the valet. Trust me on that one. We had this big embankment you had to walk up to, like in the worst conditions in the world. And I'm like 9, 10, 11 years old trying to climb up this bank of ice every time we would go to Bowie. And the old people there, they had struggled to get up. But, nowadays you'd be sued for not clearing the ice off of things. And I don't know if you'd be sued for running in the conditions they used to run in Bowie, but times have changed. We cancel on the drop of a hat anymore. Some of it because of casino subsidies and simulcasting and things like that. Back in those days in 1976, if you canceled the card, there was no revenue for the day. Bowie used to handle about $1 million a day, the article said, with a crowd of 8,000 in the dead of winter in Maryland.
Oh man, that sounds like fun. I never had to battle through snow and sleet to go to the track, although I would have if I had to. But here in California, we don't. If it's now, if it's supposed to rain, we cancel. Don't forget about the actual rain. Well, it looks like it might rain tomorrow, so let's just cancel. And trusting the weathermen out here is actually a difficult thing to do. But they've, I'll say a couple of things. First of all, you never have to worry about that with the all weather. I want to beat that drum. And then second of all, that's the all weather surface. And the second thing is, here most people stay home, when they want to bet the races. And so, hey, I got a roof over my head. You can run as far as I'm concerned. Not going to bother me. We don't have that many off tracks anymore because we've learned how to fix that problem, better drainage and better surfaces and stuff like that. But on the other hand, I will say that if there's no racing, it's kind of like a day off. I'll settle for that sometimes. So anyway, but I tell you what, one of my great thrills was flying to Pimlico and flying directly over Bowie. I said I knew that place existed, and there it is. I read about it back in 1970 when the mutual clerks went out strike. We had no racing at Santa Anita from December to like mid-February. Those were the days, 1970. And I remember we had a really top 2-year-old turning 3 named Gaelic Dancer out here. And the owner wanted to make the Derby, and he couldn't run. There was nowhere to run. So he flew the horse to Bowie for a race, and he won. And never quite made the Derby. I think he got hurt after that. But that's when I first became aware of Bowie. And that's always, I've never been there. It's one of the few tracks I haven't been to, but maybe someday I'll get a chance now with at least as a training center. They might be able to they'll be building that up now with the new Pimlico. And who knows? With the purses that it might be, maybe I'll have horses out there someday.
Yeah, one of 3 training centers that are under consideration for the new Maryland consortium. So we'll see if the old Bowie training track is resuscitated. Back in the day, the New Yorkers did not race in the dead of winter, right? There was no racing like we see at the Big A now in the winter. So the trains would run from New York City right to Bowie, drop off at the racetrack essentially. And there was a big commuter train from New York to Bowie back and forth to bet the races. So that's one of the reasons why in 1976 they were handling $1 million a day on track. We did not take the train, Jeff. We went in a car, and I can tell you this. I remember this plain as day. We would take pages out of the racing form before we left. Because I'd be riding shotgun, my dad would be driving, and you know how the windshield, well, you don't know this because you're in Southern California, but the windshield gets all kinds of crap thrown on it and wet, sloppy, stuff thrown up from the road. You can't see, the windshield wipers don't work. We probably didn't even have a car that had windshield wiper fluid in it back then. So I'd literally be reaching out the window with the old pages of the racing form, the pages of the racing form that weren't the Bowie races. Maybe they were, whoever else was running at that time. I'm wiping off the front of the windshield as we're heading down the highway. That's my story, remembering Bowie racetrack, falling in the ice and wiping off the windshield for my dad while the car was going 50 miles an hour. So those were the days. Would you do anything at all to have them again? I'll tell you what.
Man, would I ever?
Fun memories.
I mean, I would. I mean, I all kinds of stories of going to Bay Meadows in the rain when I was going to school up there, and I mean, they're good times. They are really, really good times. And now we've kind of settled into the same old. But
we're soft. We're soft anymore now.
So I mean, listen, I'll concede that. Yes. Okay.
On this day when there was no live racing and thoroughbred action, hopefully you enjoyed your stay with us over the last 43 minutes. If you ever want to make a gamble with somebody on how long this show will be. It'll be 42 or 43 minutes every single week without fail. It just seems to work out that way no matter how many topics we have. But no good gambling in the thoroughbred ranks today. There is some harness action, I think, that's still going in international racing as well. So be sure to check those out at First Bet and Express Bet. Jeff and I will be back on Friday with the First Call podcast when we handicap the weekend, which includes the comp stakes at Fairgrounds, another big weekend at Santa Anita and Gulfstream Park as well this weekend. So be sure to check that out on Friday. Have a good week, everybody.